Gormagat, Ceann Comhairle. Ceann Comhairle, I think it's important after 5 months of this pandemic that we as policymakers pause and assess where we are in our response to the pandemic. I think we have seen the pandemic have a significant impact upon our society, but I think we need to recognise as legislators that our response to it must be based upon accurate factual information. If people are looking for accurate factual information on the pandemic, I recommend that they go to the state's COVID-19 data hub, which is available on the Ordnance Survey website, as it provides very detailed, factual, empirical information in respect of the pandemic and its impact upon the country. And I just want at the outset, Ceann Comhairle, to set out some of the relevant factual statistics in respect to the pandemic, as I think they must guide all of our decisions as policymakers when it comes to legislation or policy decisions. Since the pandemic arrived on these shores some 5 months ago, 25,802 people have been detected with having the COVID-19 virus. Of those 25,802 people, 1,753 people have died of or with COVID-19. Now, that's obviously a tragedy for all of those families. However, it may be the case that that figure of death is too high, because we know that when we look at the information about excess deaths in Ireland over the past 5 months, that seems to suggest that there's an excess death rate of approximately 1,200. But whatever the figure it is, whether it's the 1,753 or 1,200, a large number of people, unfortunately, have died as a result of this pandemic. I think we also need to bring ourselves back to March as well and recall why it was that we decided we were going to introduce such a stringent lockdown. The reason for it was because we saw what was happening in the intensive care units in Italy and Spain and in the hospitals of Italy and Spain, and we were legitimately concerned that the pandemic, when it came to Ireland, that we could find our intensive care units overwhelmed with people coming in with COVID-19, and we would be unable to provide them with the appropriate medical attention. That was an appalling prospect for any country to face, and it was for that reason that we made the correct decision to go into the lockdown. I think we need to record, however, and remember how many people have gone into intensive care units as a result of COVID-19. To date, over the past 5 months, 437 people have been admitted to intensive care units with COVID-19. And obviously that reached a heightened level of concern in April. I think on the 11th of April there was approximately 155 people in intensive care units in Ireland, which was a matter of real concern to us. What we need to be aware of, however, is that today, the 22nd of July, that we're in the fortunate position that there are only 7 people in Ireland who are in intensive care units with COVID-19. And that is a very manageable figure. It's obviously a very difficult time for those 7 people, but it's a considerable reduction on where we were in the 11th of April. I think we also need to assess where we are in terms of hospitalisations, because obviously a much greater number of people went into hospital with COVID-19 than went into the intensive care units. And to date, some 3,343 people in Ireland have been hospitalised with the COVID-19 virus. However, today, on the 22nd of July, we're in the fortunate position that only 13 people are in hospital with COVID-19. So we've come from a situation where we had significant numbers of people here who are in hospital and intensive care units, down to the situation where there are only 7 people in intensive care units and 13 people in hospital with COVID-19. I wish all of them a speedy recovery. I know it's a very difficult time for them and all of their families, but I think it is important to state that if we can retain figures at that level, well, then there will be no reason for us having to consider consider going back into lockdown. I know that people are concerned about the increasing number of cases that are being reported on a daily basis. I think we need to be careful that we don't become unnecessarily unnerved by those figures. It was always going to be the case that the figures were going to rise as a result of the loosening of the significant restrictions that we put in back in March. I also think we need to look at the economic consequences and the economic facts in respect of this matter. As I said last week, unemployment is now 22.5%. It's 45% youth unemployment. We need to ensure that we have measures in place to deal with that. And that's why I'm supportive of this legislation, which I believe will be very helpful to small businesses in providing them with credit to ensure that they can get their business operations up and running again. Thank you, Ceann Comhairle.